There was an auction for America's starter homes, and you were never invited. You think you got outpriced of the housing market because that's how it is now, or because hedge funds suddenly woke up one day and decided to buy your entire zip code? That is not what happened. What actually happened is that your own government quietly sold off America's starter homes at a discount in bulk to institutions, and they did it all in a way where you never saw the for sale sign. That's where you're stuck in a one-bedroom rental, scrolling Zillow like it's a dating app, and wondering how a starter home now costs more than what your parents paid for their entire lives. You feel it in your stomach every time your offer dies in a bidding war to an all-cash buyer that you never see. Every time the rent payment hits, your checking account flatlines, and dinner becomes whatever is a 2-for-1 in beige. It feels personal, like the American dream was a limited edition drop and your name just wasn't on the list. You are not crazy. You're just late to the crime scene. Let me introduce you to Ashley. 31, ICU nurse, 12-hour shifts keeping people alive. She did everything the right way. 802 credit score, 9 years of saving in a so-called high yield account that yielded roughly, vibes. No vacations, no brunch, no treat yourself, just maybe one day I'll own a loan. She finally finds it. A little 3-bed with a lemon tree and just enough yard to pretend that life is stable. You know that house. Not a perfect house, just I can finally breathe good. She writes a heartfelt offer, the letter, the photos, the I grew up driving past the street paragraph, and then boom, outbid by an LLC that doesn't even need a mortgage, doesn't need an inspection, doesn't need to see the house. All cash, 31% over asking. No contingencies, no emotions, just a wire. She walks out thinking that she lost to Blackstone or some faceless hedge fund villain. But that's not the full story. Ashley, like you, lost to a spreadsheet in Washington from 2012 written by people who use household formation and human despair in the same paragraph. So no, hedge funds didn't just wake up one day and randomly stole your house. Your government packaged those houses, discounted them, and handed them to just 7 institutions with a bow made out of your tax dollars. To understand how that happened, we have to rewind the tape. Back to 2008. The housing market is a bonfire. Wall Street is drunk on subprime, and sitting right in the middle of it all are 2 names you've probably heard a million times and never thought about it. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. These weren't tiny side companies. They were basically running a multi-trillion-dollar mortgage empires while holding only a few $billions in the actual cash. Imagine owning a skyline of buildings with just enough money in the bank to fix just one broken elevator. Their entire business model rested on one magical assumption that everybody in Washington swore by. US home prices never fall everywhere at the same time. But the pressure was coming from every direction. Politicians wanted cheaper mortgages because voters love low rates. Regulators wanted more affordable housing, so they pushed Fannie and Freddie into riskier and riskier loans. Wall Street was making billions on subprime, so Fannie and Freddie jumped in too. They were terrified of losing market share. And when everybody believes that Washington will step in and clear up the mess, why be careful? Why hold $1 of real capital for every $20 in mortgages when you can just hold $1 for every $200 and keep the profits rolling? And so that's exactly what they did. And then 2006 and 2007 hit. Home prices started falling, not just in one city, not just in one state, but everywhere. And for the first time since the Great Depression, that this will never happen scenario actually started happening. And when you're leveraged 200 to 1, it doesn't take much to kill you. A 0.5% loss, you're vaporized. Poof, you're gone. They lost way more than that. So Washington does what Washington always does in a crisis. They hit a giant red button, conservatorship, and overnight, the US government effectively controls now around 60% of the entire mortgage market, millions of foreclosed homes, and a financial crater the size of a medium-sized European country. Just like that, Washington isn't just writing the rules of the housing game, it's holding the game board, the dice, and a couple million pieces labeled 3-bed, 2-bath in a decent school district. And there is the problem. If they sell those homes back to regular people at real market prices, they have to admit losses so massive they make the 1980s savings to loan meltdown look like a parking ticket. So what do you do when you are the accidental owner of millions of foreclosed homes and you absolutely do not want to show the taxpayers just how big the hole is? Well, you start looking for a shortcut. And so now we are in 2012. The crash is technically over, but it still smells like smoke. Picture millions of foreclosed homes just sitting there like Leon's Isle of Broken Futures. You see grass overgrown, windows boarded, families gone, balance sheets bleeding. So the government, well, they have a choice. You have option A, sell those homes back to families one by one, normal listings, local agents, regular mortgages. It is slow, messy, and very visible. And every sale will come with a little line that whispers, "We lost money on this." Or you go and do option B. You call a handful of Wall Street firms and say, "You guys want a monopoly starter pack?" And guess which one they picked? They gave it a very wholesome, boring name, the REO-to-rental pilot. Sounds like a community garden, but in reality, it was more like bulk sales to sophisticated investors, non-recourse seller financing, 30 to 40% below appraised value, priority bidding. That is not just me being dramatic, that's from an actual program language. And translation into plain English, dear average American, the auction of your future neighborhood was held last Tuesday and you were not invited. Love, Treasury Department. So 7 firms walk in, no families, no first-time buyers, no, we wrote a letter about how much we love that porch. Just fonts, suits, and PowerPoints. Blackstone alone walks out with something like 25,000 homes. And with one program, one of the largest single-family landlords in the whole country was effectively born. You see the problem now? While you are being told to keep saving and waiting for the right time to buy, whole zip codes were being bulk sold behind closed doors at wholesale prices to institutions with access to dirt cheap capital. And backed by the same government that tells you it cares about affordable housing. From about 2012 to now, national home prices more than doubled. Incomes just jogged very lightly, maybe they did a little stretch. And the gap between asset prices and paychecks, that's not a random glitch. That is a policy. While you were saving for a down payment, skipping vacations, and calculating whether you could afford a slightly bigger place if you just stopped ordering on DoorDash, the government was lending money near 0% to institutions who could borrow billions. They roll up entire neighborhoods and securitize the rent checks. While you were arguing with a loan officer about one late payment from college, they were buying thousands of homes at a time with a spreadsheet and a signature. So now, 1 out of every affordable starter homes listing in your dream city is actually being owned by some Delaware LLC that borrows cheaper than your parents ever could. And it doesn't care about the school district, only the yield. Your landlord may or may not know your name. Your landlord's landlord, that's Federal Reserve, sitting on a mountain of mortgage-backed securities and a balance sheet that's big enough to blot out the sun. You can scream corporate greed all day long. It feels therapeutic, but it also keeps the real culprits in on their lunch break. Because this wasn't just greed. It was a collaboration. It was architecture. And here's the part that nobody told you. The sequel is already in pre-production because right now, 1/2 of US mortgages are locked in under 4%. Millions of people are just sitting on cheap, fixed-rate debt that the system quietly hates. Not because it's evil in some moral sense, but because it blocks the next fee, the next refinance, the next turn. And cheap debt is great for you, but is a traffic jam for them. So fast forward a few years, those low-rate loans start to roll off. Life happens. People move, people divorce, people lose job, or people need cash. And the moment you crack that low-rate shell, you are right back in the world with higher rates, higher prices, and buyers who are not families, but they're funds. And guess who's going to be waiting for the next wave of motivated sellers when that happens? Fresh capital, government, less credit lines, the same type of players who bought Ashley's lemon tree the first time. Your parents' houses, your neighbors' houses. We finally paid this off celebration in the suburbs. That's all potential inventory for the next bulk sale. Pension funds are desperate for yield. Institutions are told that single-family renters are the new safe assets. And federal agencies who already learned in 2012 that selling to individual families is slow, politically messy, and hard to track, but selling neighborhoods to funds, efficient. So no, the American dream wasn't stolen. That word sounds like somebody just broke into the window and snuck through the side door. What happened was way worse. It was legalized, optimized, warehoused, turned into a product. You didn't lose that bidding war. You were just never on that invitee list. And every time someone like Ashley posts Wall Street stole home ownership, the people who actually wrote the rules get another election cycle to pretend they're shocked by the consequences of their own policy. They get to point at some cartoon villain, greedy landlord, or faceless hedge funds, while the architecture stays untouched. Feel that shift, that little click from helpless range to now what? Good. Because this is the moment where most people go one of two ways. You have door number one. You stay mad at the characters on the surface. You keep renting from an LLC that owns half of your neighborhood. You keep praying for a crash and not realizing that the next crash will be handled the same way as the last one. It just means another sale, and you are not going to be allowed to attend. Or you go door number two. You get uncomfortable. You get liquid. And you learn how the auction works before the next round. You figure out how to pull capital instead of just saving a loan, how to maybe partner instead of just daydreaming, how to buy distressed assets before they hit institutional pipeline, how to be early to the fire sale instead of watching it from the news. You stop playing a pure consumer in a game where the only winners are owners. Most people, well, you know this, they will pick door number one. They will scroll, they will rage share, they will type the system is rigged in the comments and then show up to the same system completely unarmed. But the tiny minority, the ones I'm talking to, will treat this less like a strategy and more like a memo. The game is fixed. You are not crazy. And fear is never coming. But here's the part that no one tells you. You don't need fear to win. You just need awareness and positioning. You need to understand the script. Walk into the set and make sure that the next time that there is a fire sale on the American dream, you're not watching from the sidelines. You are wiring the earnest money. So where does that leave you? Not as a victim of some mystical housing curse. Not as a failure because you don't own a house by 30. Not as the late one in a generation race you were never supposed to have won. It leaves you as someone who finally saw the stage lights turn on. Housing isn't insane because you're bad with money. It's insane because Washington made a series of decisions in rooms you were never invited into that turned your starter home into someone else's asset class. This isn't red or blue or left or right. This is access. Who gets invited into the next auction and who is still refreshing Zillow, wondering why every decent house disappears after 3 days. Now you know the secret you were never supposed to see. What you do with it, that's your move. If this explains something you've been feeling for years but couldn't quite put into the words, or someone else in your life is sitting with a tight knot in the stomach, share this before the algorithm quietly decides you're not supposed to see how this trick works. Because the truth isn't red or blue, it's rent. And yours probably just quietly auto-renewed. Click like, comment, and subscribe, and we hope to see you on the next one.